critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, and happy Memorial Day. This is Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano. Our guest today was to be Paul Sutliff. He's a professor at the Nazareth College of Rochester in Rochester, New York. Unfortunately, we have not heard from him this morning. So, of course, that's very embarrassing for us. We don't know why we have not been able to connect. Is he on the line? He's on the line? All right. Would you put the thing back up again? Okay, he's back on the line. We're going to have to ad-lib for an hour. And let me give you his proper introduction. Let's get him on the line and let's see what it looks like. All right, you want to set that up, the camera to the webcam. There we go. Okay, here we go. Folks, do not try this at home. Paul, there you are. Where have you been? You scared the heck out of us.
Been trying to call in and learn more. I tried typing in the original direction and for guest, and it didn't.
It didn't take. Okay, well, if I was in your shoes, I would never have connected because I'm when it comes to these things, I need a lot of help. So thank you very much for being on our program. Folks, our guest today is Paul Sutliff. He's a teacher and a research writer. He founded the Muslim Brotherhood at Nazareth College in Rochester, not Rochester, New York, 2 years ago, and tried to get some answers. For this, he was blacklisted on the alumni site. This set a fire in him to immerse himself into researching and learning more, and what was the inspiration for Paul's first book, Stealth Jihad Phase 2, Infiltrate American Colleges. Since publishing his first book, Paul continues to engage in speaking engagements, including radio shows such as this. Paul sees himself as an awakened American who has only just recognized that we in America and Canada have had a war declared against us by an enemy our governments refuse to recognize. Paul, thank you so much for being on our program. It's a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you.
Right. Now, Paul, this subject is of particular interest to me, primarily because it's probably the most misunderstood concept, if you want to call jihad a concept or subject, because of our mainstream media. All we seem to do is vilify anything that has to do with Islam in one way, shape, or form. And some of it is justified, some of it is concocted for political reasons and for ideological reasons. The end result, at least from my perspective, and please square me away, feel free to do so. I'm not perfect. I actually made a mistake back in 1954, so I'm not a perfect person. I corrected it immediately, but I'm not perfect. And it seems that no one seems to be ever talking about the same subject when we talk about Islam, the conflicts in the Middle East, retaliation against some of the Western states, etc. So tell us about your book. Tell us about why you started this organization at the school, and why did you get the backlash that you received?
I didn't start an organization. What I did was I discovered that there was a terrorist affiliate at Nazareth College of Rochester. What happened originally is I was taught. I belonged to a 9/12 group, which basically. It's like a Glenn Beck type group, but
right.
It means 9/11 we were attacked. On 9/12 there were no Democrats, there were no Republicans. We were just Americans. And we're just a bunch of patriots who get together to discuss on what we can do to help make the United States a better place. This is a small group that's here in Rochester still. But this started 2 years ago for me when somebody came up to me who knew I went to Nazareth College. I got my graduate degree from there. And said, did you know the International Institute of Islamic Thought gave Nazareth College $500,000. I was already a research writer. I read avidly every day. Can you imagine? I mean, you know a name, and you're sitting there worried, have I heard this before? So it takes me about an hour's worth of research when I get into it, and I start looking, and I'm like, oh my God, these guys, IIT, they like to be called triple IT. These guys are actually part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, 2 years ago, we didn't know, you and I probably didn't know much of anything about who the Muslim Brotherhood are.
Correct.
Today there is, this is 2 years in the running, and now we've had a Muslim Brotherhood government. We have had numerous things happen that have just shown that the Muslim Brotherhood is truly a terrorist group. Again, it's not like it hasn't been shown. Hamas, for example, is a chapter of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's a huge worldwide organization, and they actually wrote a piece that we know about, and this is the part that got me the most. When I wrote my first letter to the college, I had read this section called the Explanatory Memorandum. And there's this chapter in an explanatory memorandum, very small, an explanatory memorandum of the North American Muslim Brotherhood. Funny thing about that particular document is Suhail Khan of the Conservative Union and Grover Norquist insist the Muslim Brotherhood do not exist in North America, yet they're heavy supporters of it. But they insist it doesn't exist, yet documents prove it exists. I'm just going to read you this one piece, and you decide if there's a war declared against North America. Remember, jihad means holy war. That is the only definition of it according to Islam, unless you're talking to a non-Muslim. Okay. It says, understanding the role of Muslim Brotherhood in North America, the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands, in the hands of the believers, so that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Without this level of understanding, we are not up to this challenge and have not prepared ourselves for jihad yet. It is a Muslim's destiny to perform jihad and work wherever he is and wherever he lands until the final hour comes. And there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack, but would the slackers and the mujahideen be equal? Sounds like have a war declared against us. This was written in 1991.
Okay. Well, let me just let me step way back. In every religion, there are fractions. You take the Christian religion. There are probably as many phases or sects of the Christian religion than there are Christians. It's amazing. Now we know of some of them. There's the Methodists, there's the Lutherans, there's the Episcopalians, there's you name it. There's Catholics, which is part of the Christian religion, but an offset of that, and each one has its own creed, and they all subscribe to a slightly different philosophy on religion, on God, on who Jesus Christ was and what he did. They attribute different levels of deity to Christ. I mean, you name it. In fact, if you get two people from the same religion, the same sect, it is even difficult for them to agree on everything. So, religion is a very malleable, it's sort of floating out there, and you can change it at will and still be within the confines of your own religion. And I'm not picking on the Christian religion. I'm just saying all religions are like that. And of course, this is being primarily a Christian country, people could identify with that, and that's why I'm using that as an example. The Jewish religion is the same thing. You have the the Hasidic Jews, you have the conservatives, you have the liberals, you have the moderates, and they're very, very, very different. In fact, there's probably more tension within the Jewish community than outside the Jewish community in some aspects. Isn't the same attributes apply to Islam, that there are moderate Islams, there are people who believe in the Islam faith but want to be part of the world community, and then if you go on, all the way on the other end, you get the radicals, the ISIS or whatever, saying that everyone dies who does not subscribe exactly to these precepts. It doesn't really make them any different than anyone else. What's your response to that?
It's pretty much how I used to believe with Islam. That's what I used to believe before I learned more about Islam. Understand that they've just like the Catholics have a pope. The Muslims had a leader as well called a caliph, and this ended in 1950. Shortly after 1915. The difficulty here is that the caliph was in charge of all of Sunni Islam, and by their own thinking, they were in charge of all of Shiite Islam as well. This is the Sunni leader, and while the Shiites may not have listened to him or may not have given him credence, they probably did listen. The caliph is supposed to be in charge of all of Islam. It's not like there's Protestants versus Catholics in that respect. It's a totally different concept. You have to understand also is that the caliph has the right to declare war on anyone, any place, anything, any country. Understanding that, then you have to look back at the 1915 fatwa to get a little bit closer clue as to why I'm saying there really is no difference between what people call a radical and a moderate. Just look, if you go to your average Muslim today, I'd love for people to just do this by themselves, find the answers for themselves. It's better than asking for me. Go to your average Muslim, ask them if there's such a thing as moderate Islam. They will tell you no. In fact, there's documents published by the Canadian Muslim Brotherhood group that say it's an oxymoron. Say that there's no part of Islam is being moderate. Well, again, when they're not, I'll get back into that one later. There is a whole bunch of things with Islam that are required. Islam is really, in many respects, not a religion. It is, in most respects, a political identity. So if you look at it that way, think of Islam as politics more than you think of it as religion. It'll make it a little easier to explain.
Okay.
Do we think of radical Democrats? Do we think of radical, people pushing democracy? We really don't. And the reason for that is because you either believe in democracy or you don't. You either believe in communism or you don't. You either believe in, and that's what it comes down to. Islam has its own laws to the point where they believe all the world, even you and I who are not Muslim, should be following these laws. This is the reason for the attack in Texas. It is also the reason for several several thousand people on Twitter and from all over the world on Twitter, making comments against Pamela Geller's idea of draw Muhammad. It's an amazing thing. Now, if you look at, I'm going back to the 1915 fatwa again, issued by the last caliph, you understand three things. Jihad, again, jihad has three different levels. Until the 1915 fatwa was released in the 1960s, the average American could not know this. It was hidden for 50 years. Our government felt it was so dangerous to them if the Muslims in this country read it, that they might become jihadists right then and there. So it was a good reason to hide it for 50 years. Now here's another problem that I'm just going to explain before I get into saying more about this. The average high school student in 10th grade now is required to learn about the Armenian genocide. That requires every high school teacher, social studies teacher in America, to teach the 1915 fatwa. Unfortunately, most of them are not. social studies teachers are required to teach cause and effect. Why did this happen? I just sat in a class this week where it was not taught why it happened. The reason the Armenian genocide happened is because of the 1915 fatwa. It defined jihad on 3 different levels. The first level is called heart jihad. So every Muslim, it's required upon every Sunni Muslim, they say every Muslim, not just every Sunni. Every Muslim is required to feel jihad in their heart, that they should be getting rid of the unbeliever, that it is their duty. They have to feel in their heart. That's jihad, first level. There is another level called the word jihad. If you are living in an area, let's say like North America, and you are unable to take part in active jihad, you should be writing, speaking, talking, preaching about, for the purpose of subverting that country, for the purpose of taking it over for Islam. And all different levels, you should be doing this. If you're not doing this, you're not doing what is required, which is basically what civilization jihad is. It's the second level. You should be moving in to these countries only for the purpose, again, of jihad. Now, the third level, active jihad, the bloody jihad we're seeing through ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That, again, these are all levels of jihad. If it is considered an honor to take part in that, besides taking part in the level of bloody jihad, the other person that gets credited as a jihadist is the one who gives money to the jihadist, the one who financially supports him. So while the person who goes out there and dies for the sake of Allah is considered a jihadist, gets his quote reward of 72 virgins, all the jihadist that gives money and let's say dies probably on his deathbed shortly after giving may also receive the same rights as that jihadist because he's financially, and this is defined in that fatwa.
Now the money that was given to your school, you said $500,000?
Yes.
Why was it given to your school? How was that money used?
That money was used to quote to work a interfaith group. We now have a Muslim imam leading the interfaith group. This particular imam, Dr. Muhammad Shafiq, says that Islam means peace. I've had fun with that. I got him to publicly admit that Islam in Arabic means submission. So I've actually written a fun couple pieces on this.
But isn't that a positive step that they come forward, that they are visible, and regardless of what their the level of their ideology and where they stand, isn't it best that they come out and discuss it? Even if they use words that are moderate, so to speak, so they don't come across as being radicals, but that it is put on the table, people can discuss it, and there is some interaction. Isn't there a natural effect of modification, if you will, of what they are, of what their original intent was of coming in, regardless of what their original intent was? Don't they sort of just that natural process of assimilation and of understanding of people? Because you're talking about individual people. They may go in there and believe in jihad in its most strict sense, and they may come out after listening to this dialogue saying, well, maybe I shouldn't be so radical. Maybe it's not all that right. Maybe we should learn to get along. I mean, isn't there an opportunity there? I mean, to me, I would rather they have an organization come out and be public rather than having a secret organization in the basement somewhere, not knowing if I get to my my car in the parking lot, whether or not I'm going to make it there because I may not believe what they believe. I mean, isn't that a step in the right direction?
Well, let me put it this way: the ones who are out there currently in the colleges, is it better that they're out there when they're purposely deceiving you about what they believe? This is another requirement in Islam called taqiyya, where they purposefully lie to you about what they believe. I got this, like I was saying, I got Dr. Shafiq to publicly lie He lied and said Islam means peace. He'll lie to tell you anything to make you think Islam is a good thing. And that's actually discussed with Muhammad. He tells people deceit is war. War is deceit. Understand, we live in the land to the Muslims called Dar al-Harb. It is the land of constant warfare. For the Muslim to be here and to tell you the truth about what he believes is never going to happen. It is not part of their belief to actually tell you the truth. It sounds kind of scary, kind of odd. It's so foreign to everything a Jewish Christian person understands. We're required to, but Christians were required to if Jesus said something in secret, to scream it from the rooftop. If the Jews were not allowed to tell anything in secret, keep it hidden, their belief structures has to be open. We are told that, Christians are told that if you deny Christ, he will deny you before the Father. There's a huge difference there. Muslims are allowed to deny Muhammad and then go back and act, like say they're allowed to pretend to be Christians, they're allowed to pretend to be Jews, they're allowed to be anything. They can deny Muhammad, say he's an idiot, and then go back. As long as they did that for the sake of jihad, they are fine.
Right.
So this is a huge difference between coming out and talking about what Muslims believe. Are Muslims really doing that? The answer is no. They are only talking to other Muslims about what they really believe.
But that's my point. And my point is that if in fact they come out and they lie through their teeth, like if my wife asked me, did you just look at that young girl passing by? I go, me? I don't know, I wasn't. I was just thinking, I lied through my teeth, But eventually, my wife knows I'm lying, But isn't the same principle apply here, where they come out, they say something, they are they're proven to be deceiving in what they're saying. Isn't that good? Again, I say, isn't that good that they are lying, they are misrepresenting, and they're deceiving, and then they are called to task for that? That doesn't strengthen their position, that lessens their position, and those people who want to understand may understand that, hey, this is something I don't want to be part of because it doesn't hold water. That's my whole point. I mean,
well, there's only one person there's like, okay, you have to have somebody like me around, or somebody who has a camera around to truly take this lying bit that they're doing, play it back over and over again for people who's on boards of colleges. This is where we get into difficulty, when somebody's openly lying and nobody takes an action. If I was a professor of psychology and I told you Freud was an idiot and that he should be, nobody should listen to anything he said, but yet I could tell you those things and nobody should, but to teach that stuff at the same time, and to be a professor at the college supposed to be teaching that, you're in trouble. Yeah. You're probably going to lose your job. Well, now, the professor in Islam goes out and lies about what Islam means. He keeps his job.
Right. Well, the professor, this is extracurricular. This is not a course study then in the college, right? This is a organization.
There are courses in Islam now.
Okay. All right. Now, in colleges, aren't we encouraged to think critically? I mean, aren't people going to these classes saying, wait a minute, Charlie, I think that's a lot of bunk. I don't buy that. Or if that's what you believe, that's fine. Don't burden me with that stuff. I'm too busy. I have my muscle car outside, my girlfriend. I'm having enough fun. I mean, we can't. Are we relegating our students to a point where someone can get up and say the most ridiculous thing in the world, and then we say, well, because they said it, everyone believes it? I'm of the persuasion that if you said something radical to me that made no sense in a class, now I may have to repeat it to pass a test, but I'm not going to believe it. In fact, if anything, it's going to prove to be a contradictory to what you're trying to accomplish, because now you've made me even more steadfast in me not believing what you said.
You and I went to college in a different time. Unfortunately, the truth of the matter is we were taught critical thinking on a much higher level. I think today kids who go to college do not have those critical thinking skills. They do not have that encouragement from the professor to challenge what they believe. And that is a huge difference with reality. If you're not going to encourage, if you're not going to encourage critical thinking, then you're in trouble. That's what's happening in these schools. They're not.
I agree.
Encouraging.
No, I could not agree more, because this is a problem. We had two groups in the past couple of weeks. One, Young Americans for Liberty and Students for Liberty, and we had the chairman of regional chairman from both areas, one from the East Coast, what they call the Deep South and the South, and one from Texas. And the big problem that they had was the lack of critical thinking among students, that they just accept anything that sounds good. If it sounds good, it's got to be true, and they follow through with that. And I agree. We have a real problem with critical thinking. In fact, that's a thorn in my side, because we can't get people to think further than what they hear on television. They just repeat word for word what they hear, and that becomes fact. And I'm with you on the same page. I'm having a problem making that understanding, rather, that you have an organization, your organization.
I don't have an organization.
I'm sorry. Is it a club or what that you have in?
I'm just an author. The Muslim Brotherhood group I discovered at Nazareth is a terrorist group. I don't know. I run the most. I'm basically an author. I work with a 912 group. I do a lot of research. I run a little small news service called the Independent Chronicle, which is off of Rebel Mouse, and
okay.
I post all the stuff I'm reading and sharing. Those kind of things I do. I do a little blog called Paul Sutliff on Civilization Jihad. It's at paulsutliff.blogspot.com. I do those things because I right now I don't have a big enough entity to grow.
Okay.
I'm just, it's me. I'm working with groups like Act for America, local tea parties, 912 groups, going around speaking to them to try and get anybody who will listen, who will give me 5 minutes to share what's really happening. It's a scary thing when the liberals have the platform and they're telling things, they're schmoozing up with people who basically want to kill them. There was a lesbian person out there. This is one of the hot news on Twitter yesterday or the day before, that there's a lesbian who's defending Islam, and you're sitting there like, what are you, insane? They're going to throw you off the top of a building or stone you. Come on, you want to go? I'm going to give you a free today. Let me see if you support them still. Get off that plane, I dare you.
That's funny. But is there no one in the entire college saying, hey, this is a course that's being taught? Here's the real story. Now for the rest of the story, so to speak. Is there no one in the entire college doing this? I mean, is the college that numb to what is going on, or are they that evasive to the whole issue that they won't even address it? There's no one. I mean, not one professor, not one person, no one. Everyone is just accepting it, and that's a total condemnation of our entire college system.
This is what I'm getting at. I've for two years ago, I wrote to the president of the college, and then I get blacklisted for even asking questions off an alumni site. So if you're getting blacklisted for asking the questions, imagine what happens if you do what I did this.
Well, when you say blacklisted, what does that mean?
Well, on LinkedIn, I'm an alumni of Nazareth. I was on an alumni site with Nazareth. I was writing questions about it. They sent me a note saying I am banned from this site.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm banned from Nazareth sites.
Yeah.
Alumni sites. So I says no justification. No. I mean, I was answering questions people asked me. I was not offensive. The only offensive thing was, I was like, how can you expect someone who's lying to you to tell you the truth about Islam?
Right.
We know he's lying. I have evidence of him lying. I mean, I have witnesses, and he's not denying any of it. In fact, the last time I confronted him in front of about 30 people, he admitted to having said Islam means peace, and then admitted to having said, well, in Arabic it means submission.
Right.
He admitted to those things.
Yeah.
So that, to me, is an open admission he needs to be removed from his job.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the wacko world of liberalism, that's okay.
Yeah. All right. We're going to stop for a break for a second. Oh, look, there I am. We're going to stop for, excuse me. We're going to stop for a break. I have to get a new board operator, and I got to get rid of this guy. But I want to mention to our listeners that you can call in and ask a question. Our direct number is 646-652-4620. Our toll-free number is, which is a new one, is 855-866-1170. Let us hear from you. Call in, and when you do call in, press the one button so we know that you want to ask a question and you're just not listening via the phone, okay? Peter, just hold on, and we'll be back right after this commercial. Thank you.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
Steve Harden of the Harden Insurance Agency has over 30 years of experience designing family insurance protection, including retirement planning. Call 918-488-0024 or go to hardenagency.com and request a free in-depth estate and retirement evaluation. We look forward to earning your trust and helping you meet your life goals.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano. With us today, we have Paul Sutliff, and he's with the University of Nazareth.
I'm not. I'm not with Nazareth either. I was just an alumni there.
You're alumni. I'm awfully sorry. Where did I get that from? And by the way, I called you Peter. I meant Paul before. I called you Peter. I'm sorry. And we've had several Peters on this program. Then we have a Paul, and my son's name is Paul, and I don't like him either. But I'm only kidding. You know, I always say that. You know, but he's a wonderful person. He's like a kid to me. You know, he's 48. You know, when you get older, you don't get older. You know, my son is a kid. He's 48 years old. He's like a little kid still. You know. Anyway, but. Here's a problem that I have, and I've always had, and I don't know why more people don't look at it this way, because I'm right, and I'm always right, as you know that, right, Paul? And but here's a problem that I have. I have many friends who are what we would call the conventional conservative. You know, if anyone does anything to us or they blink the wrong way, we nuke them, and it's okay. You know, it's okay, and praise the Lord. Here's my problem. The Middle East is, the configuration of the Middle East is a direct result of the colonization of the Middle East by the Western powers. Iraq is really not a country. It is there are borders that were designed by the British Empire. The same thing goes with most of the countries in the Middle East. They have been subjugated since the early part of the 1900s, and they have been exploited since that period of time. Now, and unjustifiably, I recall even my father. He was from Italy. He during World War II he was here, but he still sort of defended Mussolini's encroachment in Ethiopia, and that was his big subject. And I said, I used to argue with him. I said, you go into a country, you take over, and he used to argue, well, we built roads there, so we can do whatever we want. He had always had an explanation, but we've exploited those areas. And even today, you look at what Bush did to the what we call as Iraq, but which is a cacophony of different ideologies and religions and everything, and we try to make it one cohesive group, which it was not. And we went in there under false pretenses and only killed 1 or 2 million people. So, I mean, we're talking about small numbers here. And then we're surprised when we hear things like jihad. Well, I'm no historian. I'll be the first to admit it, and I'm relatively ignorant of most historical facts. But have we not, in fact, practiced jihad on the Middle East for the past 100 years?
The answer is a simple no. If we were to practice jihad, we would have wiped them out. Jihad, in many respects, is you wipe out your enemy. You don't let them live beyond being slaves, unless they pay you jizya, which is a tax imposed on people. And then they can decide whether you wear something funny. You can wear something ridiculous. That goes on top of that. Let's talk about the Quraysh. This is in the Quran. We're talking about the wiping out of the Quraysh Jews. They took about 800 men and boys and chopped their heads off and put them into a pit outside of, back then it was Yathrib. It was called Yathrib, but now it's called Medina. They cut off the heads of these young men and women, of these young Jewish people. They just cut. They even checked to make sure the boys had pubic hair. If they thought they were going through puberty, they got executed. Chopped their heads right off. And they took all their women and all their young children and made them slaves, sold them. They might have given them an opportunity to convert. I'm not changing my faith if someone's getting killed, and I'm willing to bet they didn't too. They became sex slaves. They became slaves. And this is still happening today. They are still cutting people's heads off, as you can see. Muhammad had this practice back in his day, and people are saying, well, it's not Islamic. Well, if Muhammad's people practiced it during his day, I think it's entirely Islamic. These are the things that are going on. Jihad, as far as the cruelties, let's talk about the cruelties that happened. That you're saying unfairness. Yes, we did go in. I won't say we, because America was not part of this in many respects. It did not carve up the Africa. The European Union, Europe did. It carved it up and took properties. Yes. Is some of it messed up still today because of that? Oh, it's a little late to say that it's still messed up because of that. Everybody has a chance to make choices for their own. If they want to make, they want to blame history, living life as a victim. Well, Islam does that for the purpose of jihad today. Calls itself a victim for that purpose and no other purpose. It's a simple out for them. If they look the victim, they become the victor, is how they look at it today. If you look at Iraq, where does our problems go back to? For all the issues we've had in Iraq recently, they all go back to one simple thing. 1970s, we had President Carter interfere with Iraq and Iran. Actually, President Reagan is the only thing. The practice of presidents not complaining about past presidents' actions. It is the only thing President Reagan complained about that Jimmy Carter did, helping get the Shah out of Iran. And if you look at everything that's happened as a result, actually, we had the Iranian crisis. We had so many other things that have built up upon that. We had Saddam become stronger, and what happened as a result of that. And you can even blame that all the way to what we have now. in some ways, yes, that's still true. There's a lot of things happening. The actual thing that people say, like the fun thing you listen to Muslims say is that, oh, you were crusaders, you attacked us. Okay, let's talk about that first crusade. We were going, I was picking on the Catholics who led the crusades. They went and they attacked the Muslims there. Why? Well, because they had gone in and slaughtered their men and taken their women hostage. I mean, what do I mean by hostage? They were now sex slaves and slaves. They had executed all the men, and they had taken over that area. So were they going to fight and take back what was previously stolen from them through a jihad? Yes. They committed jihad Muslims committed jihad first, and yes, there were several attempts to take back that area. What was the real intent there? To free it from people who were killing the men and making slaves of the women and children. It's a huge undertaking, and in such a vast way. The only way to even compare it is if you go back to think of Egypt, where the Hebrew people were considered the slaves. If you were Hebrew, you were born, you were a slave. And this is exactly how it went. Even the amount of slavery here in America, where we had black people, we allowed black people to be free. In fact, one of the slave plantations was run by a black man down in the South. We don't talk about this in our public history. We don't talk about this in American history. Why? Because it paints an unfair picture of slavery somewhat. But that's true. We had black slavers. It's not the case that all black men were slaves in our country.
Well, no, I don't disagree with what you have said, and I'm not going to have a counter argument regarding what they have done and some of the despicable actions. I'm on board with that. I understand that. My problem is cause and effect. For example, you take the country, take Iran. Iran was run by a Shah that we put in power. We deposed their duly elected president there. We put the Shah in, who brutalized it. But he brutalized how he got there is immaterial. He brutalized the nation, but he became our surrogate. He became our man in the Middle East. And I shouldn't, in Persia. That's not the Middle East. Actually, it's Persia. But this was very distasteful, and he killed millions of his own people and he got away with it because he had the United States backing him up. It was only until the religious community rose up and finally took over the country, and then of course it got out of hand. Well, my point being is that would never have happened if we did not support a brutal dictator. We did the same thing in Iraq. Iraq had its own leader, not the best guy in the world, somebody you probably don't want as a neighbor, as a friend. However, we replaced him with someone who was a murderer, murdered hundreds of thousands of his own people right off the bat, and we supported that person. Then we gave billions of dollars worth of aid to Iraq to fight Iran because we wanted a foothold back in Iran. So, if I was in the Middle East, and if I was a Middle East person, I would say, the United States is the cause of so much of the problem. And let me give you another one, all right? Palestine, back in 1947, was over 90% Palestinians. And even the Palestinian Jews preferred to be Palestinian Jews rather than have a Jewish state because they foresee what could happen. But yet the British came in and said, okay, we're going to declare this now a Jewish state. I mean, if you were a Palestinian, which means you're of the Muslim persuasion, all right, you say, wait a minute, who died and made you God to do this? All right, we did the same thing in Libya. Look at Libya. Libya is an absolute mess today. Look what's happening in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a brutal dictatorship. We supply billions of dollars worth of aid, and what are they doing? They're destroying one of the poorest countries in the Middle East, Yemen, using U.S. military arms. I'm just saying that if you look at this as a composite, if you were living there just as a regular Joe Blow, if you will, or that would be a Joe Blow, it would be a different name, but a Joe Blow there, you'd say, hey, who's the Satan of the world? And you know, I'm a diehard American, don't get me wrong. But I mean, if I was there, I would say, well, the Satan of the world's got to be the United States. Look at all the damage. Look at all the damage and the support that they've given to the Western countries that have subjugated the people of the Middle East. Jihad, here we come. I can understand. What's your answer to that?
A lot of this stuff, some of what you're saying is true, and some of it isn't.
Well, what is not true? Tell me what is not true, because I don't want to say something that's wrong.
Yeah, Saudi Arabia. I'm gonna just pick on Saudi Arabia for now. Saudi Arabia recently had a change of king. The crown prince who supported Al Qaeda is now king. The last king was fighting off the Muslim Brotherhood, and he was fighting off jihadists. Was he truly fighting them off? He was not happy with the Muslim Brotherhood. A lot of the countries that our current president has invaded, has recently taken action in, including Egypt, all of these countries that he has pushed us into have been fighting the Muslim Brotherhood, physically fighting to the point of execution. And those are the only countries our president has invaded or has taken an action in.
But what place do we have? If you look at our Constitution, and if you look at the United States and what we represent, our forefathers said, we're in a perfect position. We have the Pacific Pond on one side, we have the Atlantic Pond on the other. We can divorce ourselves from all of the wars, the conflicts, the vulgarities of Europe, of Asia, and we can be a free nation, trade with anyone we want, and not be involved in any military conflict. Of course, we changed that with Theodore Roosevelt, one of our most illustrious presidents, who was a madman in his own right. But he had to go to the Philippines and kill 2 million people, of course, because they were such a danger to the United States. But I'm just saying, this has been our mantra ever since. I don't know I don't hear very often of jihad in Chile, because Chile took the same position as the United States took 200 years ago. They say, hey, we have the Andes Mountains on our east, we have the Pacific Pond on our west, and he says, and no one's ever attacked us from Antarctica. We leave everyone alone. We just want to trade. No kidding.
That's not true about Chile. They do have acts of jihad in Chile, just like they do here.
Well, I'm sure they have it everywhere, but I'm just saying that I'm sure they're everywhere. But this is not a major problem for them, and I'm sure the major focus of the people in the Middle East is not let's subjugate everyone in Chile. They probably just have a chapter there. I just have this big problem with us violating our natural rights, the rights that would the precepts of our Constitution. We violate constantly, and then when people get hacked off and retaliate, we go, look at how terrible these people are. I mean, we talk about 9/11. Yeah, that's 2000. That was a horrible thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going there. But I'm saying that we do a 9/11 there almost every month. There's always someone that we're bombing, that we're supplying. Look at Israel. Israel is one of the smallest nations in the world. It's got the 4th largest air force, all right? And guess what it's composed of? All F-16s. Guess who makes the F-16s? We do, and we give it to them. I mean, we are a warring nation. We want to control the world via force. And I can understand how people can become radicals, crazies, to want to retaliate.
Give weapons to people for their defense. We are a warring nation.
I'm sorry?
I'm not. if we give weapons to people for them to defend themselves, are we a warring nation in that respect?
We're a warring nation. Well, sure we are. Now, if we gave it equally, if Russia came over and said, we want to buy some F-16s, so we made it for them, fine, do so. But we probably wouldn't do that.
I think this is bad logic. If you talk about the Constitution, you have to remember what France did for us. They didn't go say, "Hey, Brits, let us give you some weapons, and then give the those people over in the colonies some weapons." That's not what happened. That's not reality at all. You need allies in life, and we needed the French. That's how this country came to be. It would not exist if the French had not helped us.
But let's get back to this. The fact is that we have the people in the Middle East have been subjugated by despots in office, many of which, not all, but many of which have had the full support of the United States, including military support. Over the decades, this festers up a tremendous amount of animosity towards the United States. We have done look at Iraq. Almost 2 million people were killed in that invasion under false pretenses. Now, could you imagine if they came here and 2 million people in California were killed? We would be up in arms all over the place. We would be nuking everybody.
The New York Times wrote 8 news pages on the WMD that was discovered, and that was in last year. That was last year.
No, he had weapons of mass destruction. There's no question. We gave it to him. We have the receipts. We gave them weapons of mass destruction because he was fighting Iran at the time, and we supplied him with every single weapon, including mustard gas.
Kenneth Timmerman actually wrote about where those weapons came from. He wrote about it during the first Iraq War. And you need to go back and read his volume on that. Excellent work from a New York Times writer. Excellent work. He talked about where those weapons actually came from, those chemical weapons. In fact, they called here to Rochester, New York. Iraq, Saddam Hussein called here, asking us to create asking Pfizer here in Rochester, New York, to create a chemical weapons company for him, or I can't remember the industry for him. Pfizer called the CIA and FBI and said, no, this is what they're asking for us. You need to know this. So we didn't do it here from Rochester. They called in UK. UK said, no, we're not going to do it. They called Interpol. Called Germany. They got a chemical weapons depot. They requested it. It was built. Now, does that make us a supplier? No. Does it make the Germans a supplier? They did not. Again, these people went and wanted something. They purchased it from some Nazi who was willing to help them. A former Nazi actually took part in helping them build their original chemical weapons depot. Yes. So again, that is not us supplying that. So saying that we supplied those is entirely historically inaccurate.
Oh no, it's not. No. We supplied them during the Iraq-Iran war. We supplied them with weapons. I mean, they did not make that. We supplied them with a majority of the weapons during that war. Now that predates what you're talking about. Predates all that.
Even going.
But we did. We supplied them, and we made certain. We're the ones that supported them for Saddam Hussein to get into power through the CIA. I mean, that's a historical fact. My only point is I don't want to get involved in the intricacies of who did what. My point being is that even if it's just a perception, and only what I said was partially accurate, just partially accurate, give me 40% accurate, still it's the perception of the people that you have outside influences coming into this country, dictating how this person's going to treat the people. And if someone comes around and says, hey, we need to restore the state to where we were prior to Western intervention, you're going to get things like jihad. Don't get me wrong. I'm not pro-jihad or anything like that. I'm just saying I want to understand why why people think the way they do. A survey was taken this was about 20 years ago, and time flies by when you're having fun. But and I think it was coordinated by James Buchanan at the time. And they took a survey around the world. This is when the Ayatollah Khomeini was in Iran. And the question was to all, and how they did this, I don't know, but they asked people from around the world, which nation would you want to be most like, or which peoples do you want to be most like? Which type of person, what type of society would you want to be most like? And I don't recall the exact question, so I'll give a cacophony of them. And it shocked everyone, absolutely everyone, when the number one country around the world, out of the 200 countries that they solicited, right? The number one country at the time that wanted to be more like Americans than anyone else was the country of Iran. And it shocked them. They thought Iran would be at the bottom of the list. Well, the reason for that, they learned, was because of the Ayatollah Khomeini being in power. We sort of divorced ourselves from the Middle East, and people saw the way the Americans lived and said, hey, they're kind of a neat people. You know, they like rock and roll and stuff like that, and they have a free country. But I'm just saying that, so the perception of the people were the people, not the country, not the government or the officials, were very, very not pro-American, but wanted to be like Americans. Understand what I'm saying? That's because we left them alone. And all I'm saying here is, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying that we hold some responsibility for this jihadism because of our interference in the Middle East. That's my only point. What is your response to that?
Well, in the 1970s, this survey was probably taken in the 1970s.
It was. I don't recall. I mean, when I say 20 years, you know, I'm 72 years old. I don't remember anything. You know, you have to excuse me. Okay, Paul. 2 years
older than your son. My father's turning 79 this year, so I'm turning 80 this year. I look at life. Look at these things. Interesting things about Iran during the 70s, before things changed. People like Valerie Jarrett's parents were there in the 1960s, working in medicine and social work there. Iran back then, if you go back, I encourage people to go back and look at Iran and Iraq in the 1970s. Take a look. You'll be surprised. The pictures depict scenes that you would think were from here in the Europe, any place, and they're just beautiful scenes of people enjoying themselves, being average citizens. Today, if you take a snapshot over there, you're likely to find women in burqas. You're likely to find men.
I agree. I'm on the same page. I'm just saying I'm looking for cause and effect. That's what I'm doing. And I'm saying that I think that the cause is because we have pushed people to an extreme position because of our extreme position, and so we kill a few million people. You know, get over it. That's my problem. We kill a few million, get over it. I mean, it's only a few million people.
A lot more. You're making it seem simpler than it really is.
No, it is. It is very, very simple. We attacked Iraq. And over 1 million people, men, women, and children died. Today we send, we have a suspected terrorist somewhere in the Middle East. We send a drone over there, throw a cluster bomb down, and only suspected, not proven in the court of law according to our Constitution, right? We sort of hit the area, but you know, there's always some men, women, children killed. If anyone did that to us once, there would be a world war. That's my point. What's your counterpoint to that?
That's an easy one. The Constitution talks about war, and war is under under POTUS, the President of the United States. It has not. There's no constitutional provisions governing how war is carried out.
But we're not we haven't declared war. That's my point. There's no declaration of war.
And you're right. There has not been a declaration of war since World War II.
Right.
You are correct. I argued back in 2001, the public was informed that we had declared war on terrorism. In 2001, that's what the public was told. It is wholly inaccurate, and the only reason I know that is because I sat and argued with someone about this. And then he challenged me to go prove myself. And this is one of the reasons why I, again, as a research writer, I spend tons of hours trying to prove myself right or wrong. I don't have a problem with adjusting my beliefs if I prove myself wrong. I'd like sometimes to be proven wrong. The stuff I'm learning on Islam, I am just overly shocked about. I recommend a book. It's called It's All About Muhammad. Let's see if we should put this up here so everybody see it. All About Muhammad. I recommend it to everybody. It is called A Biography of the World's Most Notorious Prophet by F.W. Burleigh. Learn history. Go back, learn history. Things like what you're talking about. Do the research. Find out what actually happened. Spend time learning about Iran and Iraq. Histories of it. Read, go back and find old histories written in the 1960s, in the 1950s. Go back, because there's going to be things that today you won't find in an average textbook. And I say that because we do have people acting as censors for the purpose of changing history. We've talked about, you think about that book, 1984, where there's a person like going back and changing things. That's happening in our American textbooks today.
Oh, no, absolutely. I agree. No, I agree with that, Paul. I mean, our textbooks are totally inaccurate.
I worked with a wonderful gentleman who probably one of the most ingenious persons I know of as far as history. You can tell him your birthday, and he can tell you exactly what happened on your birthday. So when he goes, he's a history teacher. He loves history so much that if you told him your birthday, I can tell you today, he would be able to tell you exactly what happened. I told this to a child once when she's visiting my classroom, and she's coming in to the school, and I says, well, go talk to him. He's going to tell you and tell him your birthday and tell him you want to know what happened on it. And he did.
Amazing.
So I says, just like that, and this is how important history has to become to us as Americans today, in order for us to truly understand what's happening around us. And again, I'm still learning. I'm still grasping all of what's happening. My purpose is just to become my mother taught me I'm supposed to be a lifelong learner.
Right.
That was one of her things. She was a teacher, and she wanted us to constantly be learning, working on learning things. I look at history as a foundation to success in whatever we choose to do. As far as what's happening in Iran today, there is a point where you have to say people make choices, and you have to live with them. I can't blame my actions on somebody who lived before me. I can't blame my actions on something that happened to somebody else. And that's the reality of the world. When you start blaming your actions on something that happened before, or something somebody else did, then you're in trouble.
Well, it's not only what they did; it's what we did and doing. That's my problem. If we did it, we say, well, we made a mistake. It didn't work out well, and we stop. We don't learn from our mistakes. We have a habit of compounding our mistakes. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
But I'd like to leave you with a comment made by probably the most brilliant woman in the world, and that's my mother. My mother was when you talk about a simple life woman, she was it. She used to complain that my father was always complaining about the international situation back in the old days. And she was such a simple woman, she never drove. She didn't drive a car. She stayed home. She cooked. If you came over, she'd say, sit down. She'd cook you something to eat. She was an absolute angel. This is what she would tell my father, and I'm going to pass this over to you to mull over. She used to say, Victor, after he used to rant for about a half hour, Victor, if people would only stay home and mind their own business, the world would be a better place.
George Washington.
She would be the best Secretary of State we ever had. Paul, thank you so much for being on our program. I hope you will accept our invitation to return at a later date.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, very good. Okay. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support. We'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, but let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. As my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.